Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Ponytails Podcast. My name is Andres Gamboa, and I have a new mic. So if I sound different, I apologize for that. If this is your first episode on the Ponytails Podcast, well, let me tell you a little bit about what we do. We interview people that used to go door to door for a company called Southwestern Advantage. This company's been recruiting college kids since 1868, so well over 150 years, and they have them go out and sell door to door. Usually it's books, but now it's books and websites. And they do this for 80 hours a week, oftentimes in a different part of the country where they're going to school from. So I, for example, went to New York and New England while I was going to school in Nebraska. And so every summer, about 3,000 kids, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, do this, including students from Europe. And they come here and they do this job. The idea is to build a resume, learn some good experiences, and use that to buff up their resumes as well as make some money. So we go find people who did that program and see what they're up to now, and we ask them about their experience, whether it was good, bad, ugly, pretty, whatever. We let them speak that experience into the show, and it's what's been moving us along well over 200 episodes now. And I want to thank everyone who has been listening for that. If you guys like this, great. If not, that's okay too. But if you do enjoy it, please go check out some other episodes, like and subscribe. Find us all over social media. We're everywhere. And of course, if you would like to leave us a review, that would be phenomenal. That's the best way you can help. Besides, joining our Patreon, but we never like to ask about that. So if you have more questions, go check out, message us, or go check out some other episodes. There's way many more people that have been on here that have some incredible stories. And so my guest today is one of those people. I'm excited because I kind of got a gist of one of the stories that we're going to hear, and it sounds like it's a doozy. So let's check it out. Today, Peter Varberg is on the show. He currently lives in San Diego, California. Go Padres. I should have been wearing, bro. I'm gonna go get my jersey on here in a little bit, Peter. Just he sold for 8 summers, part of the Total Domination organization. Sold from 2008 to 2015. He went to Point Loma Nazarene University. He's from Tacloban, Philippines. I hope I said that right. He's gonna correct me later. I know it because I probably butchered that. Currently works as a coach with Southwestern Consulting. His favorite scroll is number 6. Today I will be the master of my emotions, and you can find him on Instagram. Peter Varberg Coach, like you see it on the screen, or you can see it on the episode notes below. If you want to tap on that, it'll take you to his Instagram profile. Now, when I come back, we will be on with Peter. Dang, dude, I feel like I should have got my Padres jersey on.
You should have, man.
I mean, it's right over
if we
here.
were
Should
winning,
yeah. I know. It's so hard to watch. It's hard.
Man.
Are you a
See,
fan? Are you actually a fan? You too, brother.
I have struggled to keep up with sports as an adult. So I have been to my fair share of Padres games, and I really enjoy them when I do. But in terms of following the team, I can't say that I do.
That's fair. That's fair. And plus, they weren't really good until like recently, and still you can argue.
I mean, going to Petco Park, that experience is pretty awesome. I think.
Yeah.
I'm kind of loyal to that park. It's really, really beautiful. But
yeah, I hear it's like the prettiest in baseball.
Yeah, Point Loma, actually, my university is rated the most scenic baseball field in the country. Looks like you're hitting the ball into the ocean.
Wait, what? I want to.
Yeah,
I look this up? So
you can. So Point Loma is on a national park, actually, and it's on the cliffs of San Diego, Sunset Cliffs National Park, and the baseball field overlooks the ocean. So obviously, there's lots of land before the water, but from the angle that you're playing baseball from, it looks like the ball is just going out into the water.
Whoa, that's crazy. Let me share this screen. Not many people watch. Most people listen to the show. But hey, who knows? You never know who's watching.
They're going to watch this one.
They're going to watch this one. They're going to want to. I'm going to throw this on the screen. Oh, look, we got Got a commercial on this. Boo.
Oh
Okay,
man.
here we go. Look at that. Wow. Look at this. Yo, that's
Yep.
crazy. What? That is though. I mean, but then no people can stand back there. So home run literally is in the ocean.
Yep.
That's cool, man. How awesome. Well, okay, that's awesome. Go Padres. Oh, I missed opportunity. I have the City Connect jersey though, but I did wear it for
Oh,
Dana's
cool.
episode. So you don't want to do too often.
I mean, it's worthwhile for Dana's episode, bringing her home.
That's right.
She's
She is
more
from
of a
San
San
Diego.
Diegan probably than I am because she grew up here. But
Dude, I want to live in San Diego. I live in Portland and it's nice, but San Diego I hear is like just the beautiful weather all year, every year. That's what it sounds like. But it's so expensive.
yep, sunshine tax. That's what we call it. It's a great place, but right now we have what we call May gray and June gloom. So although May and June can be beautiful months, San Diego, for some reason, we have a lot of overcast days. So I haven't seen the sun in a while.
Oh,
At
interesting.
least here. Yeah.
Here we got the opposite. It's gloomy and rainy most parts of most days from like December through about March or April. But then now, oh dude, like today it was sunny, maybe 80,
Mm.
75. Just leave your windows open, turn the AC off. Oh, it's nice. But maybe someday I'll move to San Diego, catch a Petco park. I've never been there. So Petco Park game I've never been, but I will go this year. Dude, let's jump in. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Cheers to San Diego. You got water. I got this good old hum kombucha. Thank y'all for sending us some kombucha. I always like to start with what the heck have you been up to? 2015 was 8 years ago since you sold books. Woo-woo. How did you end up? You're a Southwestern Consulting. How did you end up here? Have you been doing it the whole time? Walk us kind of through some of the highlights since then.
Well, when I left Southwestern, I actually my original plan, I was going to go back to school. There was a Bible school through one of the churches here in San Diego that I wanted to go to. And then when I left Southwestern, I started getting recruited by all these different companies. And I was like, oh, I can't take a year off my career. So I looked into a bunch of things, ended up doing family heritage with my brother, who's still working there. And great company, great opportunity. Um, wasn't quite what I was looking for. I think when you look at the sales spectrum, there's like transactional type selling, and then there's like long relational selling. And with Southwestern, I think what I did well with in the summer is because I could be a student leader and I could mentor and coach other students. That kind of um, is what I thrived on. And the door to door, tons of people every day, quick transactional sales was not my favorite. So when I went
Same.
into family heritage, it was like all of that piece and not the other piece. Although you can build organizations and lead, and that's kind of why I went into it. Um, it was kind of too far out for me. So I ended up going to the Bible school I planned on going to. Did that about a year. Ended up going
Wow.
to South Africa on a missions trip, Haiti on a missions trip. Those are wild stories. I got mugged in South Africa. I got evacuated by the UN in Haiti. So lots of fun things there. And
What?
then I went to the Philippines to work with my parents for a year. I was a teacher at a school and the chaplain. So I would do the weekly services for the students at the Christian school. And then I came back and I was like done with sales, done with commission. I was like, I'm going to get a just a salary job doing media. So I studied film and graphic design in college. And so I was like, I'm going to find one of those jobs. But one thing I'd learned when I was in the Philippines was I really had a passion for like teaching and speaking and also working with people one-on-one. So then I kind of reached out to Thinking Ahead, which if you don't know is
Yes.
Andres, listeners, it's like a Southwestern's executive search recruiting arm. And
Yeah. They find
talked to
headhunters.
Hans. Yes,
they
headhunters.
find you jobs.
Yes. And I was like, hey, is there anything like in training, teaching that's like, I looked at my life. I was like, well, I have about a decade of sales experience, so maybe I could teach that. And that's how I came to Southwestern in about 2018 was when I started here.
Oh, so 5 years. Okay, that's a solid. That's enough time to really have built up your clientele and ramp it up.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people. By the way, Will Metcher, who is one of our partners and sponsors. By the way, shout out, buddy. Love you lots. Thanks
Shout
for
out Will
supporting us.
He got me to do one of these crazy Spartan trifecta races.
Oh,
come
this
on,
guy.
Will.
Stop getting people to do that. We don't all want to be the best versions of ourselves. Let us be fat. I'm kidding. No. Thanks for pushing everybody to be the best version of themselves, Will. But yeah, okay, so that's right around the time he started as well, right? Or no, maybe he started a little bit before that.
Like a year or two before. Yeah. By the time I was looking into it, I'd called Will and kind of asked about his experience, and it seemed like he was. Yeah, I'm curious how much sooner, but I think a year or two, closer to 2 years before I did, because he kind of came straight out of books into that consulting.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, dude.
Yes, I kind of opened up all these things.
Yeah, and this is so that was your part.
I gave you all the juice.
What I ask.
Yeah.
Thanks. You're making my job really, really easy. Okay, question number 1: the Philippines. So your parents are there. They're missionaries.
Yes.
I see. Okay, I'm putting the dots together because again, for people who don't know who sold books, and this is their first episode, we don't do research intentionally to illustrate how you can like create a connection with someone, and all you have is this shared experience of trauma of the Southwestern experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so your parents, so you were born there.
Yep. My older brother and I were both born there.
God, what about your sister?
So sister Vicky, she's curritly a district sales manager with Southwestern Advantage right now.
I saw her.
She's got a wild story.
Yeah, I had lunch with her like last 2 weeks. I was in Nashville like a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I heard about that. Who was telling me?
Heather, maybe?
It was Heather Fisk. Yep.
Yeah. Also,
so Vicky. So how our lives worked growing up is we'd spend 4 years in the Philippines, and then my parents would come to America for a year, and my dad would visit the 23 churches that supported us and kind of give updates. And the year we were in America happened to be the year that Vicky was due, and also happened because of my mom's pregnancy. They found her breast cancer, and Vicky was 2 months premature. So they had to take her out in order to start chemotherapy and radiation. So Vicky's actually preemie. And so Victoria Grace Varberg is victory over cancer by the grace of God. So Vicky's a special one, and we love her.
Wow. That's so crazy, dude. So your family was just going back and forth, doing amazing things and beating cancer and stuff, or like trying to have babies. And wow, dude. Your family's bananas.
So my dad was raised in the Philippines because his parents were missionaries there, and then my mom was born and raised in Africa, in Zaire at the time, which is now the Congo. So if you watch the new Tarzan movie with Margot Robbie and Alexander Skarsgård, the language they speak in that movie, Kikongo and Lingala, she can kind of understand. It's been a long time, but she's like, oh, I know what they're saying. And she's not reading the subtitles.
Bro, that is so wild. Because the one thing I did read that you did pass along as far as information, let me make sure I got this right, is your family. I gotta make sure I get this right. Your family all has a record for most what is it? Most
years, I think.
Aggregated.
Or and Vicky can give you more details. She made an award for my dad as a plaque with like a door knocker on it. And I think she confirmed with Dan Moore about some most units of an immediate family. I
So
did
your
not contribute
dad
a whole lot to that, but I contributed in years, 8 summers.
How many units is this? We gotta figure this out because now I need my kids and Danny's kids to try to sell, so then that way we can try to beat this record.
Uh-oh. No, it's okay. I mean, you'll have to ask Vicky. But all I can say is my dad sold 7, one of his brothers sold 4, the other brother sold 2. I had a
What?
cousin that sold a summer. My brother sold 7, I sold 8, and Vicky is on her 9th.
Bro, we got to get you guys. We've been trying to do like a family, like a book family episode, like series,
Yeah.
or not, or like a recurring theme where it's like this is the family episode, and so at least once a season. So it's y'all, the Weeble houses, also like Nick and they all sold, and both parents sold, and then I don't know if you ever heard of the Arndts, Elena Arndt. She sold right around the
No.
same time that you had sold. She was in the force. Her dad and her uncle and like some of her cousins also all sold, and then she sold. Obviously,
I mean, the
there's like
Barnetts, man. You
families.
could get the
Yeah, the
Barnetts on
Barnetts, dude.
here. You could get,
The
Joey and, what are those guys? Why am I blanking? Anyways,
The
there's
Ignis
another
brothers.
family.
Yeah, the
Well,
Ignises. A lot of them sold.
no, there was a close friends of the Barnetts. I'll remember. I'm just blanking right now. But,
I got
there's a
you.
lot of big book families,
The
like
Marcel.
siblings.
Yeah, the Mayers. There's 3 siblings. Mayers. They're all from NOLA.
Mm.
They all sold their. They've been asked, dude. That's hilarious. We're gonna have to get you guys all on here to kind of
That would be a wild ride.
Yeah. We don't call it the Ponytails podcast for nothing.
Yeah.
Dude, okay, so that is amazing. So your parents, man, you've been exposed to so many different cultures and so many different like walks of life. Like how do you think that's affected you personally with that? Besides or
Yeah, I
before and
think
post Southwestern?
well, it's interesting because my dad sold and he was kind of the one that started it. And part of the reason, like, for him, he saw just like when he sold, he saw what a life of successful seeking money might do because you are in these homes and stuff. And I think part of what convicted him on like living a life overseas was like he got to taste and see what that looked like. And he's like, great for some people. I'm going to go serve over here. So for me, I think what's impacted um, my worldview the most, if you're taking like all these experiences together, is growing up in the Philippines. I felt like I knew what poverty was like, but Filipinos are a very like happy, joyful culture. And they'll be playing basketball on some power pole, like electric wire pole with some makeshift hoop and flip flops and having a good old time. And I thought that was my perception because I grew up in what would be considered poverty. And then I went to Haiti and
Oh boy.
experienced a whole nother level where, it's the most impoverished country in the Western Hemisphere. And it was literally like we had to hide in order to eat our lunches because it's so bad there that like if you didn't I met people where it was like this real realization that if this person isn't helped, like they will starve. Like there's so much depravity.
Yeah.
And then the book field was very interesting because I'd see people that had like what the world would define as like the perfect and even for me, I'd be like, man, I want this house. Like I want these cars, or they'd have like a boat slip in the back, but it was still like this internal emptiness, and like divorce and kids on drugs and all this stuff. So it's kind of interesting seeing both sides, like an external brokenness from like poverty and all of that to like the internal difficulties that we have here in America, where everything on the outside looks clean and pretty, and internally people are really hurting. So it's been interesting to see all those
That's
different
super interesting.
points of view. I think Southwestern's like a really cool sociological experiment where you can see so much of the world in such a short amount of time.
Bro, I get it. That's so wild. I mean, growing up in Colombia, same. I haven't seen the poverty that you described in Haiti, but I've seen poverty.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I understand it. And then yeah, you're right. When you go to these big brick houses and you're like, what? But I think one of the things I also learned is everybody's broke at different levels. Like whenever I go sell like these big brick houses and they literally did not have the money, like you could tell they weren't joking when they said they didn't have the money for, $200 with books. And like their rug was
You want a
probably like
crazy story
1,500.
about that?
Yeah.
Want a crazy book story about that?
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, one of the most mind-blowing experiences. So I was in Janesville, Wisconsin, the same summer I met who was Mitt Romney's vice presidential candidate? Paul Ryan? Paul Ryan? Was
Was
that
it?
it?
I don't remember.
I met his wife. She lived there and he lived there, but everyone's giving me pre-pros. Go knock on their door. Anyways, didn't sit down with them. But one of the nicest streets, biggest brick streets right on the river. There was this big brick house, like literally brick, not just big brick like fancy, but windows up the whole side. It was like one of the prettiest houses I'd seen that summer. And I'm pulling up around this driveway, up around to the back, and I see a mattress leaning up on one of the windows. I was like, that's weird. It's just like no sheets on it, just a mattress like leaned up against the window, like what you might see in like a not so good neighborhood. And I pull up,
Right.
I come inside, the house is like empty. And I sit down with this mom. And long story short, they were really successful selling background playground equipment. They had a company in Florida, that was where the family was from, super successful. Husband bought this house for cash. It was like his dream house. They moved out here. Because they moved, the business kind of fell apart. The people he delegated to kind of destroyed it. So he was always traveling back trying to save the business. And because it was one of the nicest houses in the area, they couldn't sell it. They owned it straight in cash. They saved up the entire year to pay property taxes, and they bought groceries off donations from friends and relatives.
That's wild.
And
So they couldn't sell it
you
because it
can't
was too
sell it.
expensive. Yeah, nobody
No
wants to
one
pay
else
the
was in the
you know, the
market to
$8
buy it.
million.
Yeah, in that area, right? And
That's
so for me, I was
crazy.
like, wait, that was the first time I realized, because some people, houses are an investment, right? They could be, but also that was my first glimpse of like, wow, this house is destroying their life and they can't do anything about it. They're stuck. I mean, they could like
They're under
foreclose or,
it, yeah.
I mean, they can't really foreclose because they've paid for it. They own it in cash.
Yeah. They're stuck with it. It's like having a bunch of money in a currency that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
'Cause
And
you're
the
like, "What do
summer's
we
great
do?"
for people to
What?
tell you just how much of a money pit a house is, where they like
Yeah,
complain and you're like, yeah, complain. And it's like your first, second summer, you're kind of like, yeah, you're just complaining, but really, I want that house. But once you sell 8 summers, you're like, oh, I
this
don't
happened.
necessarily need that in my life. It's not as nice as it looks.
Yeah. And in the same way the bookfield does that for you with other things. Like for me, we talked about this on the show before, but to me, I will always say like the the way that you learn how to be a good father or a bad father.
Mm,
Like you get these examples. I mean, as men, you and I don't know
yes,
if you want to have kids, but in my head, I'm like, oh
absolutely.
man, if I'm ever a dad, I'm definitely not going to do that. Or the other way, where it's like, if I ever become a dad, I hope I'm like that because that guy's awesome or whatever. And it's funny, these little life lessons that the book field teaches you that you don't really learn. I mean, people learn them in life. It's not like it's the only place to
Difficult.
learn them, but it just takes a while. Or like you might learn about when you're 40 or something like that, later. And it's like, well, I'm glad I learned this now. Because clearly the people that bought that house in cash did not learn that lesson. Like otherwise they probably would have avoided that mistake, knowing fully well. Like now we know, hey, don't buy an $8 million house in cash or whatever. Cause
Yeah.
or whatever.
There's a lot of complex things to that decision, but it's just like, yeah, it's not always a benefit. Go bigger is better,
Yeah.
It's more money, more problems is a lot of what I learned in the summer, right? And money's not a bad
Great
thing,
song.
but yeah.
It's all Biggie knew.
We can play that in the commercial break.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hilarious. You also you mentioned something that was super interesting when it came to the experience of Southwestern when you said you wouldn't necessarily enjoy the door-to-door part, but you really enjoyed the the leading and the training part of it. And it's funny because there should be more reward for people like that. It's hard to stay in if you're not making money, if you're not selling a ton of books, but you could be really good at training. I mean, I know I can think of 2 or 3 people who are phenomenal. I mean, everybody that they train ended up being a top first year or a top manager, and they would just really help them understand. But from when it came to actually selling the books, that was not their forte. And I'm always amazed that Southwestern doesn't have just like a better track plan for that person, because it's like, hey, I'm not selling the books, but if you give me 5 people to train, they're all going to sell a lot of books. You know what I'm saying? Like it's interesting that that wasn't a reward.
It's interesting because it's like working with so many different sales companies now as a coach, it's just tough to structure financially for an organization to reward that. Southwestern is the most simple way. It's just like you earn it, everything is earned on your own, right? And other companies have a lot of different methods on how people get paid. But it is a really tricky thing, Andres. It's like it's not just a Southwestern, right? It's like I see it in a lot of companies where it's like, if we could figure out, because there's ways, if you recruit a big team, you get paid really well in Southwestern.
Yeah.
But there's always some gaps in, anyways, we could talk about that for a while, but
yeah, I mean that's why these get so long. So but at the same time, you don't really get paid that well in general in Southwestern in the book business itself, right? Like with what you can make. Like if you recruited a 20-person team that did really well, I'm talking about like top 5 teams. If you did that in any other industry, your your cut of that effort would be much bigger, even though it's not bad in Southwestern. I'm not going to say it's nothing, because they do pay people decently, but it's interesting that I don't know. I'm not going to say names, but I'm thinking of this specific person where he was in the force, and he was, I mean, I don't know how he did it, but he just crushed it at like training people and getting, especially their first summer, getting them to really cook, like really crush it. And then I don't know that he ever broke 5,000 units, but man, I would have been like, let's keep him however we can, because it's like he's, or just make him the only person that trains. I don't know. I know it's tough, but you would think if somebody could crack that code, what that could do,
it's a worthwhile code to crack.
Yeah, for sure. I had to kind of change gears really quick. Another question about something that you mentioned earlier, because you opened up so many different storylines there. With your parents. So is your mom still with us? She survived
yes.
the okay, good, thank God. Okay,
my mom's doing great.
Great, good to hear. I knew we kind of alluded to it, but I think I just assumed, and I'm like, maybe I was wrong. But what does she think, since all of y'all did this? Because she didn't sell books, right? So
no, she didn't.
What does she think of all y'all crazy hooligans? How does she look at it from the outside world? Have you ever talked to her about it or anything like that?
I mean, well, here's the deal. My dad sold books, and he was all about it. Like, my dad's hilarious in the sense that one of my favorite stories he shared is in college for speech class. He did a speech on why we should invest in diamonds, why diamonds a good investment. And he got a bad grade because his professor was like, "What college student invests in diamonds?" And he goes, "I do." It was a successful book kid making all this money, investing in diamonds. And it was like, he like traveled around the world for a year with one of his best friends with money he saved. He took us to Europe when I was in high school with money saved from selling books. He learned those principles early. And although being a missionary kid, he didn't make good money. He had good financial habits, but he sold Encyclopedia Britannica after books. And my mom, they would go to the mall and he would have a booth, right? And my mom would go like invite people to the table, and then he would
like
close them.
The
Yeah.
kiosk at the mall.
And he would close them at the table for the encyclopedias. And so she has like a little bit of experience of like sales, and she's like not a fan. She's like, well, I helped your dad out. I could never do what he was doing. I had fun. You know, she was just kind of like meeting people and inviting them
Yeah.
over. But yeah, she does think it's kind of wild and crazy. And that was my attitude too as a kid. I was like, I'm never
That's
doing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, because like when you grow up with a dad that sold books, I mean, is he reading Og to you for bedtime? Like, like, is he out here
He read
just
us the
like
family Bible libraries. He would sit us down at
nice?
lunch, go through the family Bible libraries. But this is what he would do, Andres. This is funny. My dad would always like, because back when he sold, they had a hard book bag, right? It was like a
Sure, the
briefcase.
sample case was
You could
yeah, yeah.
sample case, yeah. You could sit on it. And he would do things sometimes where it's like, boys, you want to get Mrs. Jones and her family up on the couch, and then you want to sit on the other side, right on your sample case, and then you can present to all of them. I don't know how old we were, but I just remember things like that all the time where he would give us some explanation of like how you want to show the books to Mrs. Jones. And I'm like in middle school, elementary, high school. I don't know what he's talking about, right? He was training us. And then he like went over to Craig Soder table and like, I've got some boys for you, Craig. Like recruit these guys. They're gonna be bookmen when they get on. And so my brother didn't have a student manager. My dad like calls Craig Soder, and Craig Soder like hooks him up with some kid that
Oh,
went to our high school. And that's how we got started. Like our first sales manager, Nate Wiebrocht, had graduated from our high school in the Philippines, Faith Academy. And our org leader, Joe Sung, had graduated from our high school in the Philippines, Faith Academy. So we got put under an org. They were all like Calvin. It's a Christian school in Michigan. They were all from like the Michigan area. And we were the random kids in California that had no connection because my brother was recruited by my dad and put under this other organization.
wild. So that's how you got into Southwestern?
Yeah. So I always loved
Craig
like
Sutter.
all those things where people were like, oh, you remember when your sales manager came to your campus? And, you know, like they'll do these
Yeah.
little skits and stuff. And I was like, I didn't hear any of that. It was like my junior year in high school, my brother and my dad sit me down and I'm like cornered. And my brother's like, I need to get a B. I need to recruit a kid, right? Like he's going to B summer. And my dad and him like have the talk with me. And I commit to the summer. And I was so scared. I was like, I don't want to go talk to strangers. Like I like social anxiety. I was like, I don't want to do the approaching. That was not exciting for me. So I like committed and like didn't even think about it. I was like, I'm going to worry about that when the summer comes. So I didn't really prepare. And I was in high school anyways. So I wasn't really taking it that seriously, but that's my
No
experience. It was
way.
not some campus meeting at college. I was 17. I was in high school, and it was my brother and my dad sitting me down in my room, cornering me and being like, you should sell books.
And you're like, okay.
Well, they appealed
That's
to my
wild.
logic, Andres. Before that, I just thought it was this crazy thing. Why would you ever do that to yourself? That sounds horrific. And then when they explained like the personal growth aspect, and I saw it as like, oh, this is an opportunity to accelerate my life, to overcome obstacles. It was like this fear, the very thing that was like preventing me from doing it, um, the like shyness. I was like, oh, so you're saying this is a training ground in which I can overcome that part of myself. I was like, cool, I'll sign up for that. So I like went into it
Whoa.
knowing I was like going into battle with my own like fears. And that's like why I signed up. So the units, all that other stuff, cool. But like when decided to sell, it was more like, I don't want this to be what holds me back in life for the rest of my life.
But that's pretty wise at the age that you were. I mean, because you were at 17, you said. So that it
Yeah.
must have a lot of that also must have came from the way that your dad and or your parents probably both just taught you to be open to, like, with your mom and stuff.
Growth.
So at this point, you're like been bred to seek growth and personal improvement, in a lot of ways, or trained, right? Or, like raised to do so. Um, which speaks a lot to, like, because I mean, most 17-year-olds me today, they don't think that way. And maybe I'm generalizing. I'm sure there are some, right? But generally speaking, if I meet a 17-year-old, they're on their phone, trying to send a TikTok to their friends, whatever, right? So it's it's pretty remarkable that was what appealed to you, right? Most of the time it's like the money, or like when the other situations that you were describing of like people getting recruited, they're about like, you know, oh, I wanted to travel, or I mean, I wanted to make money, or my friend was doing it, so I did it. Eventually it becomes about the growth, but you saw that way before. Like, they pointed that out to you and you read that really well. That's amazing, man. That's great. That says a lot about you. Good for you.
Thank
That's
you. Yeah.
that's super impressive. So, all
I
right,
didn't
let's get.
see
I
that
mean,
way as a first year. I was just like, I'm
yeah,
scared. So I appreciate that.
yeah, but I mean, that's pretty cool. And your brother probably helped. I mean, a ton, because you probably witnessed. I mean, did he change a lot after his first summer? Because that's Danny. When I recruited Danny, one of the things that he said that really attracted him was the way that I had visibly and like just presently grown. Like, he could tell the growth that I went through just by being around me. That affect you at all, or did you notice that in your brother?
Um, I'm trying to think of that first summer. Um,
It's the one that bites you.
it was a it was an interesting season of life because it was like we both left the Philippines, and then he went and sold while I was like with
Oh,
my parents, and then we actually like he went off to college. So it's like I did see growth, but there wasn't like this big memory of like my brother's a different person, right? So
wow.
I didn't
So
quite. I mean, I saw
you
growth, but I don't think that was a significant part of my
you didn't
decision.
have like the strong evidence, though, that this is. I mean, that's pretty brave of you to go out there,
I had them
especially.
explain it, like my dad would explain, "This is where I learned this," and I'd seen my dad my whole life, and um, I'd I'd seen my brother grow, but it wasn't quite like those stories because I've heard a lot of those where it's like seemed like a different person. My brother was already, he changed, but it wasn't like a different person.
The significant one. And where did
Yeah.
you go that first summer?
My first summer was Duluth, Minnesota.
Oh,
So we
beautiful.
had the coldest showers.
Yeah.
You literally felt like your head shrink. You turn on the shower and you put your head under it, and it's like
Yeah.
because it's so cold. And half the summer there was an alumni that was like flipping houses. So he had a house he bought that every time we came home, we had to switch on the water downstairs, like in the basement, in order to like turn on the lights. And like there were switches that we had to turn on to get the house working. It was like not a fully furnished house. We like big 2-story house. We like all lived out of this one little bedroom, and there was like some of the rooms were under construction. And man, that was an interesting little little experience there.
That's so wild. You go out to this first summer, and I guess we're jumping around here because normally we do that first later on, but it's
Yeah,
flowing well, if you don't mind. But I
sure.
always like to ask about first at this point. Do you remember your first, door, your first customer, any of those things? If you don't, we can breeze past this. But normally speaking, I like to see if people recollect that first door. So scary, man. It's like,
Yeah, my first day on the book field, I flew in and then I shadowed. And I shadowed
oh,
John
nice.
Chai. I don't know if you know John Chai, but he
No,
lives in Cambodia now. And man, I thought John was a legend. He was a god. I think all we did was like, I think we had like 16 sits. Maybe we sold some kids' books. It wasn't an impressive day. But what impressed me is that people would reject him and say like, "Oh no," or like close the curtains and not answer the door. And he just like didn't care. And he went to the next house. And I was like, the whole day I was in awe of like, he didn't get emotional. It didn't hurt his feelings. I was like, so I would love to be like this man because, and it was nothing about what he sold or what he said. It was purely when people like reacted weird or poorly or negatively, it didn't phase him at all. And that was a core memory from that very first summer and that follow day. And I was just like, one day, if I could be like that Superman of like,
Whatever.
negativity and whatever comes at me, I just like, haha, make a joke. And I remember he literally did one of those third person approaches where he was like, oh, here's Peter, and he's going to show you some books. And I was just like, and then he was joking and he ended up doing it. But I was so scared. I remember just like having that like freezing moment of like, no, I'm not ready for this, John. I'm not ready. I haven't practiced my sales talk yet. I'm supposed to sell 2 days from now. Stop it. And yeah, that I really remember like that like first follow day. There were so many memories that are ingrained from that follow day. So
Wow.
my first day, I don't know how much I remember from that compared to the follow day, but there are some fun memories from my first week. That's for sure.
What do you got? Shoot them out. Shoot a couple that stand out to you.
My favorite was sitting down with a family, and they bought books, and they said, "This sounded familiar. Wait, we met someone just like you, and he looks like you." And what had happened was there was another first year that had already quit that summer that my brother shadowed in my turf, and my brother presented to this family 2 weeks earlier. My brother looks just like me. And they said no to my brother, and then they bought books from me. That was like the biggest confidence boost you could give a first year. I was like, my brother, you said no to him, and you bought books from me. I was like, I rubbed that in my brother's face. I was like, yeah,
Yes.
they didn't even remember you. I look like your twin, and they didn't even remember you.
You weren't
So
even
that
that
was great.
memorable.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Bro, that's actually a lesson in and of itself right there of uh I think Og talks about this, but it was like on one day they might say no to your goods, but on the next day they might open and welcome to your home and feed you and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
what does that say about follow up? What does that say about, you know, not giving up on people? I mean, it's just such a powerful lesson to learn. Your first week, that's crazy.
I think about that story when I listen to that scroll from Og. I literally like, oh yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Wow. But that also caution there to be like, hey, take no for an answer sometimes. They're not ponies, you know. There's like a thin line that you got to toe, right? Of they said no, so just move on. Go find
Yeah.
the easy yes. That's super interesting. Wow. And Duluth, how did you know you wanted to do more than one summer? I mean, you end up at the end of the summer, and I'm sure we're gonna get stories as we go along throughout all the summers. But like, I'm always curious why people decide to come back because you know what you're getting
Yeah.
into.
I mean, for me, like I said, the student leader piece was like what I was most interested in. So as soon as I like had experience, got to some Sunday meetings, had some PCs, I was like, I can't wait to help someone else have a better experience or stronger start than I did. So like few weeks into my first summer. So my first summer was like 7.5 weeks. And then I delivered for half a week and I didn't go to checkout. I just mailed my paperwork in and then I flew to the Philippines to finish high school. So I had a very short summer and it was kind
Whoa.
of awkward. They kind of made a special thing for me to do it because I had such a short summer. And 2-3 weeks in, I was like, I'm excited to help someone else do this. And then it was, I don't know, I think GRS or something where someone talked about like you should stick around until you've learned what you can learn here. So for me, it was like, I'm at least selling for college because there's not really any other thing I can do with my summers in college that's better than this. And then once I found out about full timing, I was like, oh, I should try that, unless I had other better options, which I didn't. I was like, I should do that. And it was like full timing usually is like a 2-year. The first year you're kind of messing around. Second year you kind of get your bearings. And that was 8 summers for me. It was just college and 2 years full timing. That was it. 6 summers by the time I graduated college. So that's why, like, I kind of like signed up. The joke was like I was signed up till I graduated college, like after my second summer.
Dude, that's hilarious. Well, but man, how expensive is a ticket from the Philippines to GRS? That's gotta, I mean,
so I didn't go. Well, I didn't go that GRS. I didn't go to GRS until after my second summer. My first year recruiting was funny because I had like 70. There was like 70 kids in my class graduating that year, and not everyone goes to America for college. So like my pool to recruit from, I didn't bring any recruits my second summer, but I had a couple like PCs. I think I had 2 calls with student managers.
Yeah.
Obviously, I talked to my brother, but like I was not recruiting.
Quick.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're like, oh, that's everybody. I did one info session for my entire class, and nobody was interested because you had to go to America for that. That's so wild. And do you remember some of your? This might put you on the spot. So if it's a story for business, or if you can't remember, that's okay. But do you have memories of really feeling like you were growing as a leader because of the way that you were training? Like let me explain where I'm coming with this. There's a couple of things that I trained my brother on when I was, training him, and some of the other people that I trained, that I go, I'm really proud of the work I did. I hope that made the difference for that person's life. But you felt were important, or like that you helped people that maybe helped you more, because sometimes you do a PC and it helps you more than the person that you're helping. I don't know if that ever happened to you, but do you have anything like that, lessons that you shared, or ideas that you shared to some of those kids that you really take with you still today?
Well, I mean, what's coming to my mind is, like you said, like when I needed help and then I helped someone and then I felt better. I have specific things like that, but are you asking for like topics or specific pieces or principles that
like
I
one of the
felt
things
really good about?
Yeah. So, for example, one of the things I learned about myself through teaching this to Danny was about self-talk, and really what good self-talk is. And it's not about, it's going to be a great day, even though you're trying to bury all your fear and negative emotions down. It's better to just say and acknowledge those, but then talk about why you're tougher than that circumstance. So if it's raining, it's like, it sucks to sell in the rain, which initially might be a really nag thing to say. But if you say, hey, it sucks to sell in the rain, but it doesn't matter because I'm tough and I am a person of my word. And so even though it's raining, I'm going to work because it doesn't matter. And I'm a professional and I'm good at it. That's a lot more powerful, right? Than it's going to be a great day. I liquid sunshine, or whatever they tell you to say. So that's something I carried with, because I said that to him and I'm like, oh, maybe I should work on that. Like it was true for both of us. So I always carry that with me, and I think about that all the time, like very, very frequently. So noting that you were so passionate about training, I was curious to see if you had something like that. You're like, wow, that was good.
I have something that's coming to my mind. It was what, I don't remember what summer it was. Doesn't matter. But I had he wasn't my first year, but he was in my HQ. And he was just going on and on about how he was getting beat up, and basically like Mrs. Jones was kicking him in the face, I like the imagery, not literally.
Sure.
And he was just getting beat up on the summer. And I remember sitting in my car, he was a walker, and we're just kind of debriefing before going into the house. And he kind of looks at me and he's like, and I don't remember what I was saying to him that caused this response, but he's like, Peter, like, why are you so cool? And I was like, kind of thrown off. And I was like, and then it kind of came over me. I was like, because I've got kicked in the face by Mrs. Jones over and over and over and over again. And it's that principle of like that obstacle is the way. And like a lot of times that thing that we're pushing through is what actually gives us the character and the growth that helps us grow as a person. So it was like this real moment where I was like in the middle of a PC and he was just throwing all of the negativity of like what was getting him down, why he was quitting, why he was going home. And then he kind of shifted and was like, how are you the way you are? And I basically said, that stuff.
Yeah.
That's why I am the way I am, because I've grown my character through that. So that's something that I think
Wow.
about often too.
That's sweet. See, that's some time. That's some good. That's some good. That's good. Write that down. Write that.
Avery, write it down.
Whoever's listening, write that down. That's so funny. Well, dude, I appreciate you sharing that because there's little moments of and wisdom, kind of like we are talking about, like the parenting things, where the bookfield, it's not a story that you tell on this podcast where it's like this amazing thing that happened or that blah blah blah, but it's those little moments that really just shape the entire trajectory of your life. I've found so many of them, talking to people here where it's like just that simple choice that you made that completely changed the direction that you were headed. So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. Um, I wanted to ask you, back to jumping around, you are now working with Southwestern Consulting. Um, how are some of those, as you look and you meet clients? I love asking people from consulting this because it's so funny to hear. As you're meeting with clients, how shocking is it to see how basic of errors some of these salespeople are making that are like, do you know what I'm saying? Like that are just so you're like, how are you not, pre-approach explaining this? Like, can you shed some light on like some of these situations and how validated it was to, or validating it is to have that experience just from like your first week of the book field?
Yeah, my experience starting here at consulting, I was 27, and although I'd sold books, I would thought that like Dave and Emmy were taking a risk on me in terms of like my evidence proven by my units, you know? I was like,
Mm-hmm.
the Dave Brown is interviewing me. And it's like, and he's like, so tell me about your summers. And he's like trying to, see if I've got the chops to like be a coach. And I was like, I don't know how I sneaked through that interview process, but I had major imposter syndrome. Like when I started
Mm.
here, like I would read the bios on like the consulting website of all these other coaches. And I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to write my bio? I have nothing good to say. And then when I started selling clients or enrolling clients in coaching, I was like, assign them to other people. I had like no confidence to even take on clients that I sold because I was like, oh, these other coaches, they're so amazing. And that just kind of gives framework of how I started in this role. A lot of imposter syndrome, lack of self-confidence. And so I remember one conversation with Dave Brown. He was a PC, and he said, Peter, in your pinky finger, like you have more knowledge about sales in your pinky finger than some of these guys. And I was like, really? Because I'd like meet these people that are like running companies and like all
Yeah.
this stuff and, these big successful lives, making a lot of money. And then he told me that. And I've really found that to be true. Not that, talking down on other people, but it was like what I learned in Southwestern gave me such a foundation that far surpassed my years and like my idea of what made me good because of my units or how many books I sold. Like I constantly like met people time and time again that were like so experienced, so many years in sales, and they just never crossed like this very foundational threshold of like very simple sales tactics. They just did the same thing over and over again, and it was good enough, and they built a business on it. And I was always blown away like, wait, you don't know that? Like these are basic foundational day one sales school things. So yeah, it kind of blew my mind, and it shifted my confidence in my career here because I literally was like really intimidated. when I'd talk to people or I was in selling situations, it was like I was always nervous, like if they really knew, like that I didn't, I just sold books door to door, like they wouldn't trust me or believe me. But when I actually was coaching people twice my age, and I was getting these testimonials and people talking about how we talked through these different concepts, that's when it really showed me, wow, these things I learned as a late teen and early 20s are really, really valuable.
That is hilarious. I mean, that's it makes sense in a lot of ways, but man, imposter syndrome there's a real it's a hard thing to overcome, man. It's a hard thing to overcome. We had we have a different podcast called Executive Exercises with Pat Roach and
Ah,
Lee McCluskey, and some other
yeah.
alumni, and Will's on it too. And one of our topics is it's more like an hour long. By the way, go check it out if you guys want. It's really like an hour long, and we just cover one topic. And one time we talked about imposter syndrome, but it was so much like, well, everybody has
Wow.
really amazing things to say, but it was such a, I mean, we went on some tangents that I'm like, I think we need to do like a series about this specific. It's such a hard, and like we talked about goal setting and that was covered in one episode, no problem. But this imposter syndrome situation, it can hit you in so many different ways that it's impossible to just cover in an hour. I mean, I could sit and we could probably do this podcast for hours before we really cover everything. Um, and it's hard and it happens all the time. It happens all the time
Yeah.
to people who you would not expect it to happen from as well. Just we're talking about presidents of companies to CEOs who have all the resume and stuff to get there, but for some reason, it's like everybody has experiences. It's like really the a tough thing to overcome. So good job in doing that, man. That's
Yeah.
impressive. That's
I
tough.
look at it and not to go down the imposter syndrome
Sure.
tangent, but it's like I look at it as like a core, like instinctual, like human animal type thing where it's like if you see any dangerous animal and then you get up and you charge at it, it
Mhm.
will run away like a crop. Like even the things that could totally destroy you, if you run at it, like it freaks out. And it's kind of like that's just as scared as you are of it. Right? Like
Yes.
people are so scared of snakes, and it's like that thing is just as scared of you as you are of it. And it's like that's the reality in humanity. It's like we walk into a room and I'm scared
So
to
good.
meet people. I don't know anyone in this party. And it's like everyone here is just afraid of you as you are of them. And when you go up and be like, hey, I'm Peter, and you're excited to meet them, it's like everything's done and people love you. If you can just like break through that and recognize that it's all a show, people are trying to put up a front, and what you're feeling on the inside is what everyone else out there is feeling too, then that really empowers you in social situations to really connect.
Clip that. We're gonna put this on the. This is gonna be a reel.
Yeah.
Dude, that was so good. I love that. And you don't need to be Steve Irwin, right? Is what you're saying. Like you don't need to be Steve Irwin to make the snake afraid of you or the bear. Well, the bear run. But sometimes the bear is attacking because it's scared, and it's just
Yeah.
decided to go for it. So be the bear or be Steve Irwin. Either way, you're all right.
Yeah. I actually have a book story about a dog where I was being followed one day and we knock on a door. So I had a first year behind me and he was afraid of dogs. And we knock on a door
Oof.
and not the homeowner answers. They were like, sorry, we just got attacked by a dog. There's a
Oof.
pit bull loose in the neighborhood and he attacked the homeowner. So like this first year is like freaking out, right?
No.
So we keep working and we go up and we were in Wisconsin and we're like up on this kind of hill to someone's house and we knock on a door, we turn around and then there's the pit bull. It's like across the street. It looks at us and it just runs, right? So the first year is like, running the other way. And I take my book bag and I just start swinging and charging the pit bull. And I don't know why I thought of this, but I was hissing. I was like, and I'm like swinging my book bag. And that pit bull ran away. And I was like, the first year was like, oh, is that what you do when dogs come at you? I was like, I don't know. I was like, fight or flight, you know? I was just like swinging my book bag and screaming at this dog. And literally, it's like a dog that just attacked a human and is on the loose. And it worked.
Hey, man. Imposter syndrome defeated, bro. Just taking out your, just taking out the page from the old, I know, be the first.
Dogology, what is it?
Action cures fear. Yeah. And dogology, bro. Yeah, we have it, I think, on here. Here we go. There it is. Boom. Yeah.
Yes.
There it is.
Very useful training.
Yeah, Kevin Johnson had a. Is that who you watched do dogology, or is that who was doing dogology? KJ was the best at that. So good.
I sold in KJ's hometown one summer, and like
that's fun.
A relative of his.
Did they buy?
I don't know if they had kids.
Unbelievable.
But they were like, "We know what you're doing. Do you know Kevin Johnson?"
Like, yes. How do you know Kevin Johnson? Dude, isn't it funny the people that you meet in the bookfield, like how random and the odds of like it's how small the world becomes, even though you're like halfway across it. I met a lady that knew my mom on the bookfield, just straight randomly, stuff like that. Just you're just like, what the heck? Like,
I was gonna ask you if you had like the craziest.
Yeah, I mean, I've told the story, but it's been a while. But I have two. My first summer, I love telling both of these. So sorry if you guys have heard these, but they're great. I think is my first summer. I'm knocking on this door, and you know how in the approach you say what school you go to. So you're like, hey, I'm the one that's been talking to the families. I'm the student from Nebraska, you know. And she goes, Nebraska? Where in Nebraska? I said, Grand Island. She goes, oh, I used to live in Grand Island. And I go, why? Because it's not grand or an island. And she goes, I used to work at the hospital there. Now, my mom was an interpreter at the hospital. So when people would come in and they speak English, like her job was to help them with the language stuff. And this lady was a receptionist at the hospital. Wow. So she was frequently in contact with my mother. And so I point this out. I'm like, wait, when were you there? And she goes, oh, like maybe like 7 years ago. And I go, and I started doing the math. I'm like, what that would have been. Did you ever meet a lady who was an interpreter there? She goes, oh yeah, there was this guy. And then there was this like really like charismatic, like Colombian lady, I think. And I go, that's my mom. She couldn't believe it. She goes, Sandy? I'm like, yeah, Sandra's my mom. So that was wild. And I'm in the middle of like upstate New York, middle of nowhere, bro. Just like so random. And then the other one is my third summer. I was driving, and this person didn't know anybody, but it was just a funny coincidence of how, like, what are the odds of this happening today with this person? I knock on this seat. It's the only car in the driveway I see in this middle of the country. Miles apart are the houses, and it's on like signs of life. So I got a knock. So it's this lady, no kids, and she's wearing this shirt and it says Balls, BALZ, which is a bar in Grand Island, Nebraska, and it says, you know, Grand Island. I'm like, I'm doing my approach. I'm like, hey, I'm the college. Where did you get that shirt? And she goes, why? I go, I'm from Nebraska. She goes, no, you're not. I go, look at my license plate on my car. She goes, you are. Oh my gosh. And I go, she goes, how do I know you didn't just like rent that car? And I'm like, I'll prove it to you. The back of your shirt, it says this. And so what happens is the back of the shirt says, who needs Hooters when you got balls? Is the whole idea. BALZZ. It's a sports bar. And so I'm like, who needs Hooters? And she finished it for me. She goes, when you got balls. And I was like, yeah. So just random, like she could have been wearing any shirt on at any point in time of the day. She was just cleaning around the house as a shirt she wears when she cleans the house. And I just thought it was hilarious that how, like, I was supposed to meet that lady. I don't, maybe just to tell this story and just laugh at it, but I was definitely supposed to meet that lady. I mean, the odds are so astronomical that I'd rather believe that there was a purpose for it than just coincidence, or as I heard once, coincidence is God's way of maintaining anonymity. And I was like, I like that. So fun times when you meet people like that in the book field.
I've got 2 good ones if you want them.
Yeah, dude, we're here for you. I've been talking way too much. Apologize.
You're good. In Iowa, I had ran out of turf in southern Minnesota, so I started selling in northern Iowa. And I was wearing, this was my second summer, and I was wearing a bracelet from my high school. You know when we used to wear those rubber,
like the Live Strong ones,
bracelets that were like, Live Strong, right? It was my high school. And I'm on a porch, sit down with this lady, and she goes, "What's that bracelet?" And I showed it. She's like,
"Now, hang on. This is your high school in the Philippines."
Yeah.
Okay, so this is even crazier. What's about to?
Oh, it's even crazier than you're thinking. And she's like, "Oh," and after we talk about it, this woman, when she was in like high school, raised money to buy my grandfather a motorcycle. Their church because my grandfather's from Iowa and he was a missionary. So her church, when she was a girl, a young woman, she remembers my grandfather, Richard Varberg, as like coming to their church and talking about being a missionary in the Philippines. And she remembers doing this fundraiser to like raise up money for buying a motorbike for his mission in the Philippines. She like knew my family, like generationally. She knew of our family. And it was like from seeing that bracelet.
That's bananas, bro. That's crazy. Yeah, you're right. That went crazier than I thought it was even going to go. That's
yeah. And it was like, I was like, what? Because of the chances and a little Iowa town.
I mean,
nowhere.
Wow. To remember that, even she could have totally forgot about that, but she remembers that specifically.
I mean, it was like, apparently it was a big deal, significant moment in her life when she like helped raise money for this missionary in the Philippines, and as a young woman, she was like, this is a big deal. We're going to help these Filipinos. We're going to help this man go out there. And like, we did the math of like, and they figured out it was my grandpa.
That's crazy, dude.
And then the other one, I can't remember the connection. They knew of our family, but it was also one of the coolest families I'd ever met selling books. It was in the middle of nowhere, around like Dodgeville, Barneveld, like this. It's west Wisconsin, out in farm country before you get to Platteville.
Beautiful.
And I was, when you're just driving and you're like, homes somewhere, houses come, and you're just like, I need to find a house with kids. And I pull up to this house. This lady comes, lets me in, or she answers the door and she says, hold up. And then she like goes inside and then she comes and lets me in, and find out she was putting the baby in the other room. And she was like maybe my parents' age. So her husband was a doctor, and they probably had 6 biological children, maybe another 5 or 6 that were like foster kids. And now they were adopting terminal children. And the child they had now, she introduced me. She was like in a little car seat thing, and she was from someplace in South America or the Caribbean. And she was so like allergic to things that she asked me, and I don't know if you knew this, she asked me if our books were made with soy ink. I had to call customer service while I was in the house. I was like, are our books made with soy ink? Because she was like, if I show my daughter these books, it'll send her to the hospital if they have soy ink. And our books don't have soy ink. So if you have a soy ink allergy, buy Southwestern Books. But that's how like men or health challenged this child is. And that child couldn't survive the cold winters in Wisconsin. So this family would relocate for the summers to her home country. And the family who is their, like, the biological family of this daughter, they moved them to their neighbors. So, like, the house next door was the parent of this little girl, and they had other kids.
What?
But this American family was adopting terminal children. That was the child that they had at that moment, right? Their other kids were grown. The foster kids are gone. I'm sure they had several terminal children that had passed, but they had this one child, and they moved the family from whatever the country was next door to help them relocate to America. And they legally took care of this kid because that family couldn't afford the treatments and couldn't provide the necessary things to keep this child alive. And that was what they did. They imagine terminal children. And you're like, I'm going to adopt this child and give them the best life they have and the time they have. And I was just like,
crazy.
There are people like that out there. And I was like, someday I want to do something like that where I can impact others in that way. And I just remember walking away from that house and I was like, what are my problems anymore?
Yikes, dude. What a perspective giving moment in your life. Oh my God.
And they knew my family somehow. I don't remember the story of how we got connected, but I do remember finding out through the grapevine that they knew of my parents or my family or something.
But dude, that's so crazy. There's people, I mean, the hardship that has, the toll it takes on you, because they're terminal children. So you're going to have to deal with that loss in such a...
You think people having pets, right? Like, you just have a pet and
it's hard,
that thing dies, and they're like, that tears you up. And adopting a human that has a short lifespan, it's just like, wow. How
are you so able to give that? That's, I mean, just even emotionally, right? Not let alone financially. I mean, just to keep doing it, right? But like, but to keep persisting and committing to that. I mean, if I ever had a ton of money, that's probably something like that I would do. It's just like try to help people who's like that. Who, I mean, they're kids who just want to have, just to experience childhood in a way that's that moving. Wow, that's wild, man. It makes me feel like my problems are nothing. Like you said, I feel like that now. I'm like, oh man, I'm upset about Bizzler stuff or whatever. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude.
And the thing is, it's like, their house was kind of modest. It's because that was their calling in life. That's what they used their resources to impact children that really had no other opportunities. And you meet families like that in the book field, and that changes you.
Bro, that's crazy, man. That's so crazy. Oh man. Let's let's change topics before I get all emotional here. There's one question I want to ask you, and then we can go into maybe some rapid fire, or I don't know how you're feeling on time and stuff, but I'm having a blast, bro.
Sure.
You mentioned you went to school for film?
Yeah.
Dude,
technically media communications. So
how did you decide to do that, and how did you get into that? What did you learn? I've never really, my brother went to school for film, and it was kind of cool, but he ended up switching majors. So I've never really like got to pick the brain of a book person that went to school for film.
Well, this is funny. Like, this will tell you more about like my dad and his intent. Like, so when we were kids, my dad brought us around to meet all of his successful friends in Tacloban and was like, sat down and let us interview them about like where they went to college and how they got to where they are. I don't know how my dad thinks of these things, but he's like, yeah. So we met like real life successful people and like heard about their story. Now you can listen to podcasts, but when I was a kid, it was like, that was so cool to learn. And my biggest takeaway from that whole experience is probably not what a parent wants you to run away with, but I'm like, I can study whatever I want in college because I'm not going to use that degree ever again. I was like, no one does what they study, right? You just need to check the box of university, right? So in my mind, I was like, what's fun? What do I want to learn about? And when I was in high school, I was like on yearbook and I was like into graphic design and Photoshop. So I started as a graphic design major because I was like, this is cool. This is fun. I could spend hours doing this. And then I get to college, and this is like the missionary kid in me, the like cheap kid from a developing country goes, you can double major? You can get 2 for the price of 1?
You can have
You're
more of
telling
those?
me I could have another degree? So I was like, and I don't have to do any other years. I could fit it in. So I was like, what else do I want to study? And then I kind of looked through the list and I was like, film? Yeah, that sounds interesting. So I was like, sign me up. And man, I don't know why I didn't think of that in the first place. In high school, I was the guy that like edited all the videos. Like we had small high school, like we had a chapel services, Christian school, and we'd show videos and stuff. And I like edited a lot of these promos. So I didn't realize that it was like a perfect major for me. And I loved movies. So I was just like stoked on college
Wow.
and all that I was learning. And
What do you
yeah.
learn in film school? Like, I feel like if money wasn't a problem, I'd actually probably go back to school to learn about film. I love filmmaking, movies, especially after doing this podcast and learning about like, lighting, cameras. I'm not that great at it. Imposter syndrome, maybe, but what I feel like I would want to learn, like, so like about not like movies. I mean, I'm sure you learn about movies, but movie making and that kind of stuff. What are some of the things that you learned that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, so there's different experiences depending on the school you go to. Since I was a small Christian university, 2,400 undergrad, like imagine going to a
Okay,
college
sure.
with 2,400 people,
Yeah,
right?
that was my high school.
So the yeah, that was my college. Um, so ours was more of like we did everything on set and we had basic equipment, but we got to try and fail and make movies. If you go to like a big state school or some school that's known for film, like you'll obviously get like some really cool gear and you'll have like a very niche role. But what was cool about my experience is like you had these assignments to like make a film that was like this, and you just had to practice and learn. But probably my favorite thing from film school, because again, you learn a lot of the principles of how to light sets and how to make things look good. Ultimately, our professors weren't the best at like the technology part, and that changes all the time anyways.
Sure.
But in terms of like the storytelling, how to like convert and tell a story visually, um that's what was really cool. And even like watching movies and dissecting them and understanding how they work, it's like I would watch a scene and I'd like pause and be like, I know how they film that. They must have put a camera on this type of thing and do this. And I
Yeah, I
was
was
like,
gonna ask you,
oh,
like, when you
good
watch
move.
movies. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes I watch movies, I was like, and now it's all different because of how good the CGI is and like the gimbals and everything. But before gimbals were invented, like I remember when they first created gimbals, because it was really complicated to get cameras in certain areas. So whenever you'd see these camera moves, you'd be like, how did they do that? But
Whoa, yeah.
to answer your question though, Andres, I wanted to tell you, um, conflict drives the story. That would be the biggest thing I learned, is
Mm,
that what do we watch for? What keeps us watching? It's the conflict, the drama, the interesting piece of it. If you just have a plain old, no conflict, comfortable storyline plot, you don't want to watch that movie. It's boring. And I think there's so many takeaways for our life of like, am I living an interesting story? And these conflict things we tend to avoid, the challenges, things like going out to sell books for the summer. Like, that's why these ponytails are so interesting, is because people are putting themselves in
mm,
challenging situations. And that's what a character arc is. You take a character that you learn about and they have some kind of challenge or difficulty. And over the course of a movie, through difficulty, challenge, conflict, drama, loss, grief, pain, suffering, this human changes. And that's how that arc of the movie that we get addicted to is about watching that transformation. And I think that's a powerful thing that I've taken with my life, taken with me in life, is like, am I living an interesting story? And even things like signing up for these freaking Spartan races with Will. He invited me to like the ultra one that was like a 50K. And I had never ran more than a half marathon. And I had to fly like to North Carolina, and I slept on the floor in an airport the night before. And I'm like, why am I doing this? But it was almost like that inner urge of me of like, when was the last time I did something extraordinarily interesting with my life? Am I signing up for something that's going to challenge me and grow me? And even if we talk to like Dave Brown and the fasts that he does, we do a 100-hour fast every quarter. It's like, that's why he does it. It's like, it's a challenge. It gets him out of there. And I think that's what gives the sweetness to life. Different. I was just in Costa Rica. They say pura vida, like the pure life.
Yeah.
And in the Philippines, we say ang sarap ng buhay. It's like the tasty life. I think that comes through like difficulty, challenge, and overcoming obstacles.
Ooh, that was beautiful, man. Man, you just hey, what's your favorite kind of toilet paper? And then there's like this amazing answer with a bunch of wisdom in it. And I'm like, let me just write that down. I'm gonna take notes on this. Like, this is so good, dude. I love what you said. I want to discuss movies a little bit because it's interesting. I've been thinking about this. I wrote a book. It's back there.
The citizen thing there.
Yeah, the cost of citizenship. Yes, sir.
Ah.
That's my that's the name of my book. And I talked to Dave Blanchard, who's the CEO of the Augmentino Leadership Institute, and on his episode he shared that they're turning the Og book into a TV show. And so yeah, pretty phenomenal. Go check it out. If you guys want to support it financially, just message us and we'll get you in touch so you guys can own part of the movie. Or a part of the TV show. But a lot of people have been asking me, and by a lot I mean like close friends, but who are passionate about my book, that are like they're asking if I would ever turn it into a TV show or a movie. And so that's kind of like, because talk about conflict. There's boys are conflict in that, but I'm fascinated by the idea. Like when I watch film I'm the one that's watching documentaries of how they filmed it. Like I've watched the Christopher Nolan documentary about how they filmed the Dark Knight series, the trilogy. I mean, I think
yes,
I watch it to go to sleep sometimes, bro. Like I'm fascinated by it, and so I was curious, yeah. When you're watching, like, do you ever, as you're criticizing film, is there some that you're like, wow, that was an amazing film from this standpoint? Like, what's your favorite movie, I guess, or because of the way it was shot or the way it was done, or maybe one that you watched recently that you're like, that was really,
I
really
struggle
good.
with favorites, but what I watched recently, I was like getting emotional on the plane last night. Watching the movie Air just came out.
Yes, I just watched that.
Oh, I
It's
was a
so good.
basketball player, and there
Oh,
was like so much of it that was like, oh, I miss sports. But there were a lot of things about that movie that I think they did really well, of
so
just
good.
telling that story and building it up. And yeah, it's certain movies, it's different. Like some of them, it's just like the beauty of the spectacle, and the DP, director of photography, is kind of in
Yeah.
charge of like the look and the feel. And so sometimes I'm like, man, and I look up who's the DP of this movie because it just has this like crispness and this beauty to it. And then the director, I think that's a fascinating thing from going to film school, is that you start to understand what the different roles are. And when you look at the credits, you kind of know who did what and what that looks like. Obviously, blockbusters and big Hollywood movies, it's like it's very specialized what they do. But I guess in terms of like, yeah, it's the one most recently that comes to mind.
Beautiful film. Oh,
So good.
It was. I normally don't like watching trailers at all because I
Oh,
usually try not to watch a trailer beforehand because
yeah.
it ruins the movie. unless it's like a movie like this where you know the outcome. You know what? Which is an interesting. Like Tetris is another film. Like I don't know if you've seen Tetris recently, but it's if you want another
I've seen
feel good like
the
that.
trailer.
Yeah,
I didn't know that
it's
was
like
out
Air
already.
but for Tetris. Yeah, it's on Apple TV. But my point is like we know that Jordan was going to get the shoes. Spoiler alert, right? You know, we know he goes to Nike. So it's not about him choosing to go to Nike. It's about the story. If you people haven't watched it, so there's no spoilers at all to give, but it's about the story of how they decided to come up with that shoe and how they fought for getting Michael Jordan to sign with Nike, because at the time Nike was not the number one brand. It was like not even the second number two brand.
17% market share. Converse had like 54%, and Adidas had like 26.
30.
And that was just specifically, or 30 for like basketball shoes.
Yeah, for basketball shoes. And so the idea, it's Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, really good. Viola Davis. This cast was amazing. Chris Tucker. And I love watching movies like this because again, you know where it's going, and you know that it's mostly based on a true story. I'm sure they changed things here and there, but to watch a story about how one or two people or a small group of people made decisions and were convicted enough in an idea that it ended up changing literally the trajectory of culture, humanity, and the way we interact with each other. I mean, what the world was before they did this and they released this and they signed with Michael Jordan to what it is now. I mean, the way social media, the fact that people say brands, what's your brand? Like all of that stuff was not existent until he came along. And so to watch greatness, to watch people celebrating greatness, recognizing greatness, man, it gets me hyped up. I love that movie. Great choice. So good. So good.
I literally watched it. I was like, man, if someone asked me what my favorite movie is, that's my recent favorite. And then you asked me, I was like, I have an answer for you.
Yeah. I'm glad I said something. Have you seen The Big Short?
Yes. What's funny about it, I need to watch it again because I watched it before I understood what the mortgage industry was about. And now that I've been a coach, I know the ins and outs of real estate and mortgage. And I'm like, I need to watch that movie again because it's like, now I know what they're talking about. I watched it like when I was just like a renter in apartments and I had no idea what that was.
Yeah, it hits different. And it's one of those movies that the more you watch it, the more you pick up every time. So then by like the fifth watch, it's so rewatchable. So by like the fifth watch, you're like, it makes sense even more. I went to school for economics. So, and my capstone was like the stock market crash of 08. So, and I was working in finance when I first watched a movie. So by the time I watched it, I was on the other end of that where I knew pretty familiar like with what was happening.
Spoiler alert, in 2008 it crashed, right?
Yeah, if you have been living under a rock or you were born in 08, and this is now history to you.
Not to interrupt you, but I just thought it was funny.
No, for sure. No, I mean, it's for sure. It crashes and people make it. But that movie, like, it's like Air but better, and it's another big, like, amazing cast. And I love, again, movies like that where they go and showcase like, hey, this is what happened and here's so great. I read the book. Is phenomenal. Wow, man, so fun. I could talk to you about movies all day. So we'll move it along just to keep it brief.
Yeah,
even though we've been going for a while. Okay, let me do a quick shout out to some of our partners. We'll do some this is a good time if you need to use the restroom. Guys, if you want to support us, please don't skip these. Please listen. We put a lot of effort into these to try to make them fun for you. So check them out. We're going to hear from Pedro Vega and Pat Roach. So that's really exciting. And then when we get back, I want to hear about the project that you and I talked about on the phone.
Cool.
And how that's going along. So in a second, we'll be right back.
Hey guys, this is Pedro Vega with Cardinal Senior Benefits. Today I'm going to talk about getting paid fast. One of the things that blew me away about this industry is that if I make some good decisions, work really hard on Monday, I can see the fruits of my labor literally within 24 to 48 hours. I wake up, you form the habit of checking your checking account just to see the direct deposits come in day after day after day. And it makes you want to do it again and again and again. So, guys, I hope you guys are enjoying the show, and thank you so much for listening.
So one of the things that I had to do when first starting the business was figure out how to get a client. That's important. Well, it turns out in real estate, the number one way that people will choose an agent is from a friend's recommendation. So as I started to spread the word about what I was doing as a realtor, guess what happens? All of a sudden my phone rings and it's a friend of a friend who said, hey, we heard great things about you. Could you help us buy a house? That's how we find clients. And who doesn't like finding clients when your phone rings and they're calling you?
Love Pat Roach. Thanks, Pedro and Pat, for tuning in. If you guys want more information about how to get maybe some employment or how to work on these amazing teams of companies, let us know. Cardinal Senior Benefits with Pedro, and of course Southwestern Real Estate with Pat. Check out the links below. You can apply or learn or click to get more information there, or just message us on Instagram. We'll get you connected. All right. Okay. Peter, I need to know what's happening so far with this project that you had, because
Yes.
I think it's really cool when you talk to me and do you want me to fill in the kind of the context of it, or do you want to just take it from the top? It's your call.
I can fill in. I did want to say though, I was a Cadillac. So Pat Roach, the Cadillacs. I was one of the last living Cadillacs. I love that legacy. Nice. Anyways, nice. My organization when I sold books.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like the project I'm working on is basically I just so with Southwestern Consulting, we do training as well, and companies will hire us for full-fledged training, and we'll do like all sorts of resources for their teams. And I have a sister who is still selling books. Obviously, my family has this background in books. And I don't know when it came across my mind, but I think it was like last time I was in Nashville for one of our global summits for consulting. I just started thinking about like, oh, there's a need that I've found when people transition out of Southwestern Advantage and this intense 2-month summer internship that obviously I'm sure we talk all the time on this podcast about the principles and what you learn. And it's like a lot of the things though only work in like an intense 2-month sprint. And if you try to take those and apply it to life or a career or the rest of your life, there's a lot of breakdown and frustration. And I spent a season when I was as a coach here where I had probably 6 Southwestern book kids that I was coaching, and I felt like a part-time DSL. And I just realized like there's so much to like relearn when you take like the summer and you try to like do it outside of the summer. So I'm trying to partner and put together a course for like a transitions course out of the book field into the real world. And I'm in the process, the updates, and you can dig in and ask more questions, but the updates is I'm putting together a proposal to send over to Southwestern to see what feedback they have and what type of delivery. But it's kind of like probably some kind of webinar between Summer and Sizzler for students to be able to join and just get some tools that they can implement in whatever career they go into after Southwestern.
Oh, that's really cool. And you called, so where I come in, or where we were talking about is because you called me and you're like, hey, you wanted to pick my brain about my experience talking to a few alumni. And so
yes,
so we had some really good
just a few
thoughts and shared, but yeah, but we had some good thoughts because I mean, honestly, I was, and I'm still, as I was then, a huge fan of this idea. And I think that and I told you then, if there's anything we can do to kind of partner up and make it work together, because I think it's so good what you're doing. The amount of times that we've heard on the show, I sold one summer too long, or I wish I had, been more. I wish I didn't come back for that specific summer. We hear that a lot, and the reason that people feel that way is not necessarily. I mean, sometimes it is they should have totally not came back for that last summer, but other times what it seems to be too is that the transition out was not smooth and or friendly, and or once you, and I can vouch for my brother and your sister and probably a couple other DSLs that this is the case. that are exceptions to this rule, but at least when I was selling, if you left Southwestern, you wouldn't hear from your DSLs anymore. I mean, it makes sense why, and I'm not blaming my personal DSLs for this. It makes sense that, hey, I'm no longer in this program. You're a busy person. You got kids to feed. The last thing you need to do is worry about what some college kids up to now after they left books. So you kind of, because it is the way it is, you kind of just cut off and you don't hear from them anymore. It's kind of like you're not shunned. It's not like they're intentionally avoiding you, but it just, you're no longer a priority because you're not in the business, which again, understandable, but it hurts sometimes. And it sucks for some people who are not expecting that, because that's not something this whole time in Southwestern, people have been told, or have been helped with the next emotional step. That's like one of the biggest things to teach you when you're first training new first years is you got to be ahead of them in the next emotional step. But they don't do that anymore. And so there's nobody to kind of catch you as you're leaving this friend group. And so what you're doing is a great thing, I think, for a lot of people. Um, I'm excited to see how this ends up being. One thing I would recommend doing as well that I've learned, and this is not, this is unsolicited advice, but just continue after we thought about this, and I kind of touched on this before, is figuring out like a psychological aspect to it. If maybe part of the webinar is done with some input from a psychologist to talk about what the transition's like, and really they say, hey, we talked to the psychologist, this is what they recommend in this situation, I think would also go a long way. And I think it's huge. I've heard of companies that do this. Where did I hear about this? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna blank on this. Oh, I have a friend that's, speaking of the film industry, I have a friend that's staying over right now. It's my wife's friend, and I think it was her that was saying this, that there's a specific show that she was working on in Hollywood. She was from LA, and that once you are done filming, the actors and part of the crew, they send them to talk to a psychologist on their way out. And that they do this in some sports teams as well to like help with that transition. So it made me think of you when I heard about this. And then I remember we were recording today, and I was like, oh, I'm going to bring this up because I think we go. So pretty awesome. So what if on this, I'm asking you, this is your project. It's a really cool project. What's the North Star? I mean, if money wasn't an issue, or if like red tape wasn't an issue, what's the ideal that you would have it set up?
Yeah. The kind of the vision. I guess it would be, I think the way that it would work best is like forming a relationship with current Southwestern sales managers, as kind of like, they know when people are done, right? And it's kind of like here is a kind of a soft landing. And it's like, because again, how do you know who the target audience is? I don't know how to find who's thinking about leaving Southwestern, or who's left Southwestern, or any of that, right? So I think having that kind of a relationship where it's like when people are done, it's like they get connected with the course, right? Transitions course. And then again, why I kind of got convicted in it is because as a coach with consulting, it's like I'm doing this all the time, day to day, where I'm taking Southwestern principles that I learned and I'm implementing it to like other industries. So speaking into that piece is something that I feel like I've been doing for the last 5 years. And then the idea is to have like multiple, I almost see it as, it'd be cool to have resources all through alumni too, where like, for example, maybe they have one course that's with someone from Pat's team in real estate, and like learning the basics of real estate and how that actually works goes a really long way, right? Even just a small seminar from someone that sold books and like gets the way they're thinking and can give them that vision of like how to own property for themselves, like having one class that's like a guest speaker from real estate, or like a guest speaker from thinking ahead that talks about job market stuff. And then like Pat Roach actually is the one that introduced us to my emotional intelligence coach that I use now, that Patch started working with. And I would love to see her do the kind of therapy, kind of mental health piece of like, how do we process these emotions? And again, I think with all of these, it's like, here's a general framework and resource. And whether it's, 6 like every other week webinars or like 10 once a week webinars, there's kind of like that time between the summer and Sizzler that people are just kind of figuring out their life. And if they decide to go back into books, they kind of recommit in Sizzler. If they decide, yep, this is my last summer, they kind of figure out what's next, usually after that. But it's like, they almost have this, all these tools now. So if they get into sales and they find success, they're like, oh, I remember Peter from consulting. I have this tool set. If I'm going to buy a house, they're like, oh, I remember Phil or Pat or like whoever from the real estate team that did that training. And they're like, oh, I have a point person for this skill set. And same with like Jules and the emotional intelligence, like, oh, I met her. If I need help in this area, here's a resource. So that way, like, different people can connect with these different aspects of what is really essential for success as an adult, after books. And then they have these point people who are experts in those industry, where 6 months from then, a year from then, they have this impactful experience where they learn these tools that they implemented, right? This kind of free experience. And then if they actually need a deeper dive into whatever that aspect is, they have a person that they've already interacted with that can give them a head start.
That's so cool, dude. You know what we could do that if you're interested in this help, this made me think of this.
Yeah.
We're working on creating the neighborhood. I think I told you about this. So it's like,
you were.
Yeah. So it's basically the genealogy tree, but part of the goal of this is to kind of create this network. One of the things we could do would be kind of cool is to do like a digital career fair for anybody that wants to attend after your course. And so on our end, we just invite a bunch of really cool alumni who are in all of the different industries that we found them to be in, well, that we've recorded with, and say, hey, do you want to come and talk about your experience in your career? Like, what do? How can this person join? And at the same time, there's also been a group of alumni that I've talked to that have said like, hey, is anybody, they're wanting to mentor people. They're really interested in helping paying it forward and really wanting to pay it forward specifically towards book people that are recently leaving the book field. And it's like, hey, do you need a person that can mentor you in, like you said, real estate? Besides, like, it could be Pat, it could be other people that we've had on the show who are in real estate, whether it's Southwestern or otherwise, or in insurance or whatever, and just connect these people and just kind of get them in that way. So there's a lot of really cool things that we can do, and just let us know how we can help, because I'm so down for this. This is our goal again, is our mission as of last year, and when we really started jamming with this, is to help the alumni be better connected, because they're out there and we're just trying to find them. And there's something to be said about specifically helping out, and I love that you're doing it, is helping out the new alumni, very brand new alumni.
Because I think step one is like, because I remember, and I'm sure you remember, Andres, when you were done, you're like, the world is my oyster, like I have all these options, you're like,
all the doors are going to open.
I had never, I never spent a summer in San Diego until after 8 summers selling books, because I grew up in the Philippines, right? I never spent a summer in San Diego. So it's like, those types of things are like, what? So it's like, for me, I think step one is, can we form a relationship where we actually get the right students, right? We don't want to create something that's pulling people out of books that need to be selling,
right?
But where we can really find who are the people that are transitioning, right?
And how can we full-timed, we know who those kids are. We know
the leaders do, right?
Yep.
The leaders do. And again, it's like, you build that, and then you have a value add of like, whatever they end up doing, it's going to help them translate what they've been working on from 1 summer to 10, 11 summers into what's going to how does that look like outside of books? And then once you do that, I think that kind of opens the door, like you said, after this course, where it's like now, like the alumni network, things like that, that I love the idea of like a virtual job fair, where it's like now
fun.
that they, it's like, oh, cool. Now let me look at what all these other alumni are doing and see what I want to do. I think that would be so powerful to, it's almost like step one is this type of content that they could use for whatever they do. And then once they go through that, it's like now it's an open door into what you're doing with like the neighborhood and ponytails and meeting a lot of these alumni and just forming that bridge between books and like life outside as an alumni.
Yeah. I love that. And we can bring, and this is something where you can even bring thinking ahead into the mix. And so then it's like the effort of all three of us trying to make it happen. Again, for us, the biggest thing that we care about is making sure the alumni are connected, feeling, that they are in a community and really building it together and using that giant experience and like I said, that shared trauma to really like, say, hey, we all did this, and we're all, you're not alone. We've all been through this. Some people leave and they have the oyster mentality, and some people leave and they think they actually don't come out so hot. Very underconfident. I was one of those people. When I left Southwestern, I was not the most confident person that I've ever been, and I knew I wasn't alone in that. And so there's like all sorts of different walks in life, but when you leave Southwestern, that's a hard thing. It's like a breakup. It really is, and that's hard to navigate alone. So I love that you're doing that. So just let us know any way we can help. I'm all for it.
The other idea, Andres, is like with that, you could create, there's like the couch surfers and stuff. And it's like,
we're working on
when kids like graduate and it's like, oh, I want to do like a Europe trip. And maybe people that they knew that they were connected with through their org and their group aren't doing that, but maybe they get connected with this course and then get connected in an alumni network. And all of a sudden we have a group of 10 kids going out to Europe together. And that's like their little celebratory, I'm done selling books trip, right? Like there's so many ideas.
So we're going on a Euro trip in the fall, specifically. This is like in September 18th. Jacob Levine and I and my wife, actually, who's a photographer, we're going to go and like meet all these alumni and try to start building those bridges, because it's one of the things we've noticed is there's an alumni network that's pretty strong in Europe, and it's pretty scattered in the United States, and it's pretty segregated in between the two. So the idea is to be able to like not just only do that work here and unify everyone here, but also across the pond, so that those kinds of things can be really accessible for everybody. So yeah, I'm down to help with all those things. I think it'd be fun to, like, one of the things that we're doing with the neighborhood is one of the options when you opt in is, do you have a couch that you're willing for people to, like, are you open to hosting people if they're coming through? And you can click no, so we won't, but if you put yes, then that'll appear in your profile, and so then you can like look up on a map like where everyone's at and then go from that. So that's kind of what we're working on building is that. So we got some cool stuff that we can do.
I've always had that vision. Like even with consulting, I helped our company build a map that shows like what cities all of our coaches are in. So that way, when you're traveling or you have a workshop in another state, you can literally look at a map and be like, oh, are there other coaches? And then we can go in our CRM and get their numbers and be like, hey, I'll be in your city. But again, like something like that with Book Kids, where it's not like their addresses, but you can be like, who's an alumni in San Diego? I'm happy to be on some site where alumni can find that I'm in San Diego, right? Like, and then if they want to connect with me and I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Specifically for alumni though, we don't need some OL asking if they could find an HQ.
Yes, that's like the prerequisite to join. It's like, are you still selling books? Sorry.
Yeah, that's actually been a hard line to toe. Yeah, because we've had people who wanted to be on the show that they're still saying like, hey, I'm sorry, but some things we got to stick on, and it's got to be alumni. Like there's no. Also, I just don't want to get in trouble with Southwestern where make it seem like we're trying to like, sometimes they get touchy about those kinds of things, and so it's like I don't want to deal with that. Let's just you got to be done. In fact, we've had guests who went back to sell books, who like skipped a couple summers, and now they're still. I found out the summer they're selling. I was like, oh damn it! Like, I guess they were alumni at the time, so I'll leave the episode, but that's kind of whatever.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so I'm down. Let's keep. I'm happy to continue staying connected with this, and as you're developing it, please keep me in the loop so I can like, prep and avoid doing double work, because that's a great idea. Run with that, and we'll just kind of work on
September through early November would be like the actual kind of transitions course season. So the goal is to try to launch, have some attendance. I'm not sure how big the first group would be, but like have something this year. So figuring out something post Sizzler or some other job fair thing, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, like a job fair in December, and then we can start promoting it, as we're going along. That's a great idea, my sir. Let's talk after.
Yes.
Let's stay in touch. All right, I'm gonna wrap. I'm gonna throw up some rapid fire questions, and then some ponytails. You cool? Cool with that?
Yeah. So,
all right, here we go. So rapid fire questions. Number 1, favorite territory that you sold in, state or county or city?
Favorite rapid fire. Let's see.
I know you hate favorites, so give me your like top 3 or something. It doesn't have to be your favorite, but the one that comes to mind first. Let's just say that.
I will say my last summer, I like stayed a few weeks late after everyone else left, and I went to Azle. Like it's outside of Dallas, Fort Worth. It's like this lake area. So I was like commuting like an hour every day, and I was like the only one there. It was just the most beautiful like lake country, out in the just out in the I'm totally blanking. Just like out free in Texas. I'd been working in the city all summer, and then I just got out into the wild, basically.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love that. Love that. Favorite kind of turf, whether that be like big brick, country, rich country, poor country.
I love the boundary between suburbia and country. So like right on the outskirts. So it's like literally that's what I did one summer in Texas. Is it was like, here's like where the city goes to. And it's like I did all these neighborhoods right at the edge, and then some of the country turf. I didn't really like the deep country and not the suburbs, but like right on the edge.
That sweet spot. Love it. Favorite advanced sales tape or most memorable?
I like Roger Sipes. The little trash bag.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ain't no stopping him. Favorite HQ?
Ain't no stopping him. Favorite HQ. I literally had a HQ for like a week and a half when I stayed late, and this family made us dinner every night. We like came home every single evening, and they had dinner. There was like one first year left in that HQ with me, and it was this like gift of the last week of the summer. Sweetest couple. Oh,
let's go.
North Carolina.
Oh, beautiful up there too. Man, when they cook for you, it just really touches different. Like it's like a home cooked meal. It's so good.
And they sit and listen, and they're like, "Tell us about your day." It's like, "How are you doing?" Yeah. It's like it felt like you had a little glimpse of Sunday every night before you went to bed.
And they don't believe you sometimes. Like, you know what? Yeah, it's great. Favorite product to sell or tack on?
Ooh, I was a big like Advantage books guy, later on. I would do a lot of the big book sets and like the math books, and I did a lot of websites. Tacking on the website with everything.
That's what you want. That's what you want. Favorite breakfast spot?
First summer, we had these New London potatoes. I think it was New London Cafe in Duluth. And it was like cheesy potatoes, and we'd make our Champions toast, where we'd take like toast, we'd put creamer on it, we'd put peanut butter jelly, and then we'd sprinkle sweetener as like powdered sugar.
God.
That's how he started every day.
Oh, dude, you ready for this?
Yeah.
I don't think you're ready for this. Here we go. Boom. Are we there?
Yeah. That's it.
Oh,
I hit. Wait, turn to the right a little bit. The London Cafe. That post in the middle right there. I drove my car into that one. I was trying to hawk a loogie while I was driving after execs, and I hit the post right in the middle that says Jansen.
Yep.
I drove my car into that.
Nice. Look at this place. Welcome to New London Cafe. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a great breakfast spot right there, sir. I can see why it's your favorite. Nice. Favorite or best follow day?
Being followed.
I know you mentioned that first one. Both, either one.
I mean,
I know you mentioned I know you mentioned the first one, like your first ever, but.
Well, I mean, the time that I got arrested while being followed, that was entertaining.
But that's coming.
Imagine getting arrested and having a first year behind you. Yeah, that was fun.
Brandon Q had this happen to him, and I'm excited to hear what happened to you. So, okay, let's just conclude it there and just jump into ponytails and hear this story. Wait, do you just have this one, or do you have multiple? Because we can. I mean, it's up to you how you want to do this. It's an open
multiple arrests.
No, multiple ponytails, or is it this one?
Oh well, I could probably. I've gotten in trouble a couple times, but as you can
tell,
got
arrested more than once.
Well, I was detained once. I still don't know why, but that's another good story. We could start there because that happened earlier. I was in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So this is like Fort Bragg, bunch of special forces, military, really scared moms where like they know how bad the world is because their husband's in the special forces and the husband's deployed. And you come knocking on their door like 2-3 times, in a week, and they're freaking out, right? So one Saturday, I'm doing my gravy and I leave this neighborhood and I pull out on the main street, and all of a sudden behind me, I see this Escalade.
Oh boy.
And then I turn down this country road and the Escalade following me. And then I turn into a house, the long driveway. I park, I knock, nobody answers. I get in the car, drive out. And those country roads that have no shoulder? It's just like grass. The Escalade is like off on the grass, like waiting for me to come out of this house. So I come out and I pass this Escalade and I'm kind of like looking at them like, don't shoot me, or what are you, like I'm like nervous, and then they pull out and like follow me again. So then I pull over. Like I'm like, okay, let's have a conversation. I like pull over and then they drive past me. And I'm like, this is the weirdest thing ever. And then we get to a T in the road. And so the Escalade turns right. And I'm like, sucker. I turn left, right? And I look in my rear view, and this Escalade on the skinny country road is doing like a 10-point turn, trying to like turn around for you. And I'm like, what is the deal? So then I go to this other house and I knock on the door, and nobody answers. And then I see the Escalade like pulled over. So I just start walking up to it. I'm like, this is freaking me out. I'm just going to talk to this person, right? So I'm walking on my way to Escalade, and right then the sheriff just like cuts off right in front of me, and he comes out and goes, put the bag down. And I was like, put the bag down. And he like handcuffs me and puts me in the back of the truck, the sheriff car. And he's like, you knew this was coming. And I'm like, I didn't know anything. And so it's like a hot summer day. I'm like sweating the back of this sheriff car. And I don't know, like if you have your hands behind your back and they have these plastic seats and you're like, what am I supposed to do? My arms, like, this does not feel good. And like, it's tight. And I'm like, this is so neg. I was like, I got to stay positive. This is what I decided was a good idea, Andres. I was like, he was off talking to this lady in the Escalade, and he wasn't really talking to me or giving me any information. He's like on the phone. He's talking to her. Right. And so I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I was like, let's have some fun with myself. And there's like a camera there. Right. in the dash cam. So I'm like, like making faces and like, just like having a good time and like trying to keep myself positive. Cause I'm like, I know as soon as he lets me out of this thing, I gotta go knock on the next door. So let's get a solution here. Chop, chop, right? And he comes back and he asks me a couple questions here, a couple questions there. The biggest thing I could figure out is this lady must have thought I was like breaking and entering into homes.
Sure. Classic.
And he, classic. And he couldn't find anything on me, and I was giving him my information and nothing, right? So then he eventually like lets me out, and I'm like nervous. I don't like to get in trouble. Like I follow the rules. So I didn't ask him what happened. He just like releases me and says, go get a permit before selling in the country, which actually meant there is no permit. Because I went to go get a permit for the country, and they're like, we don't have a permit. And I was literally threatened by the sheriff that detained me in his car to get a permit. So I was like, well, I guess I'm not selling in the country anymore. He was like, I don't want to deal with this guy anymore. So I just drove into the city and started selling in a different area. But I don't know to this day, like why I was detained.
Dude,
no idea.
You just reminded me of a story. And I haven't told the story on the show before, so I'm going to do this real quick. It's short. It's not impressive, and it's not fun like this anymore. But it just to have I like breaking the rules.
You do. Okay.
If they're dumb rules, I'm like, this is stupid. Like there's no, do you know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna like, break or steal because it's fun to break those rules. Morally, those are good rules. What you were doing,
I don't like getting in trouble. That's more of it. Yeah. Like, when I get in trouble,
for me, I never got arrested, but I almost wanted to because it's like an argument you won't lose. You know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, you know that you're not breaking any laws. So it's like, let's just waste this guy's time for being a jerk and just, you know what I mean? So Wellsville, New York, I'm checking into this town. The sheriff is a jerk. I mean, he's an asshole. And he's like the chief of police and he's an asshole. And I can't believe this happened. It was just felt good. He goes, you can knock, but you can't knock past 7 p.m. on this town.
I was like, shit. I've gotten those.
And so I was like, what do I do? So I got the permit anyway, and then I was really careful. I got called in one time because I was knocking at like 8 p.m. It was a cold call. I was just trying to catch up on gravy. No appointment. So I got called. So I had to go back to his office, and he's like, if I catch you again, I'm gonna arrest you. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I was like, all right, I don't need to get off schedule like that. So the solution was then I started telling, like you were saying, around the boundary of the city, and in this town, for some reason, it was very clearly marked because some towns don't have this, but like when you're leaving the county line, it says like you are now entering, or it's very well marked. And so I literally, one of the days I was knocking, I go past this line, and the very first house is literally on the line. So I knock on the house, and it's the chief's house. And his wife opens the door, and it's like 9:10. It's dark. And his wife opens the door, and she's like, can I help you? I'm like, yeah, I'm the one that's selling books. And then I hear from the back, what the fuck? So he comes to the door. He goes, I told you if I caught you again, I was going to arrest you. And I'm like, you can't arrest me, man. That very clearly says this line. And we are outside of that line. I'm not breaking anything that you told me to do. This is what you asked me to do, is to not knock into that town. If I was knocking on your neighbors, I'm breaking the law. But right here, I'm all good. So what are you going to do? Dude, I'm 18 standing up to the chief of police.
What are you going to do?
Yeah. And he just looks at me. He's like, we don't want any fucking books. And he just closes the door. And I was like, yeah. I was like, oh, dude, it was better than selling a pony, bro.
Wow.
I forgot about that story until you told me this, until you just mentioned that.
What are you going to do?
I said, so what are you going to do? He's like, well, and to be fair with you, to be honest with you, this has happened to me, and I'm not meaning to make this political, but as a brown man growing up in Nebraska, it's your relationship with the cops is different. We'll just say that. And we've been like, I got kicked out. Danny and I were playing soccer with some of our friends on a tennis court, but we were playing soccer like we were playing futsal. It's like you playing, and we were playing it was a tennis court this way, but in the other way it was a basketball court, so we used a pole and another thing to, anyway, we were playing, and this lady called the cops on us. It turned out it was her husband, and he came and like he kicked us out. Nobody else was in the park, and he said that he was kicking us out because we were refusing to leave. And I'm like, this is a public park. And he goes, why are you playing soccer on a tennis court? You're not even supposed to do that. I'm like, I could be doing cartwheels. It doesn't matter. It's a public park. I can do whatever I want here. And he just turned around and walked away. Turns out it was like this, like I called other people that are friends that had in the police force. Turns out he was like a racist cop. And so my point is, when it comes to those kinds of people, I'm like, let's get into this, bro. I know I'm not doing anything wrong. So let's see how you handle this, because you're supposed to be like the law. And I love, it's like popping a zit for me. It's like, let's get into trouble with this guy. So anyway, thanks for letting me tell
I got pulled over in Texas my last summer. I was pulling out a gas station and one of my headlights was out. So I like literally pull on the street and immediately get pulled over because he was like right across the street or something. And again, I had like a manual transmission, so I like pulled the e-brake, which is bad idea when a cop's looking through the back window, because it looks like you do this and they think you're hiding something.
Yeah.
Right. So he comes up and he's like asking me about marijuana, and he like has me come out of my car, and California plates. Of course he's going to ask. Sure. I was like, and he's like, oh, California, man. And he's like asking me, have you ever? And I was like, I hadn't even smoked marijuana at that point. And he's like asking me all these questions, and he's like looking at me like, no, like you're lying, right? And he's not treating me very nicely, right? Not compared to some other things that I know that cops do. And he asked this question. He goes, well, how do cops in other states treat you? I'm just like, not like this. Like, this is rude. And it's just like, I don't know. He just was caught on this idea that I must have been hiding drugs or something. And I'm like, I don't know what it is about me driving around selling children's books that makes you think I'm doing drugs, but
that's what. See, I hate cops. Cops are tough, man. Ugh. You learn. It's like Chihuahuas and cops. You learn to love to hate them, or hate to love them, because it's like, it's just such a bummer for you when you're selling. Okay. Speaking of which, though, let's hear about the time you got arrested, and we can wrap this guy up. This is so good.
Yes. So one little tidbit is that with that story I just shared about being detained, like 2 or 3 years later, I sold in the same turf and was followed by someone else, and then eventually got pulled over. And then they looked me up and they're like, you were detained here 2 years ago. I was like, yeah. Do you know why? And I was like asking the cop because I was so curious. Well, does it tell you? I have no idea why they detained me. And the guy was like, you idiot. And he was like, when someone's following you, you should call the cops. Don't just run away. That makes you look guilty. And I was like, that's a good point, Mr. Policeman. I should call the cops on the person following me. So anyways, there was some closure, but I still didn't learn why. So still in North Carolina, but it was in Alexander County. I am not allowed there anymore. But I was selling over a first year. And basically, I was just transitioning turfs. And I'd called my org leader, and they were like, it's very simple. It's a free permit. You just walk into the county, you fill out the paperwork, you're done. So I show up exactly like she says. Simple, fill it out, turn it in. And then the clerk is like, the sheriff would like to see you now. And I go in there, and he's like holding the thing, looks up at me, and he goes, do you have a background check from the county in which you reside? And I was like,
what? And
it was like the fine print at the bottom, right? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, where are you living? And I was like, Caldwell County, like right next door. He's like, where are you from? And I was like, San Diego. He's like, get one from there. And I was like, I had no idea what background checks were at the time. I was like, aren't you the cop? Like, can't you get the background check for me? Like,
you do?
I don't know. And he just kind of sent me off, like trying to make it difficult. Right. And I'd heard from others there's a really cocky sheriff and they don't like him and all this stuff. But anyway, so he makes it all hard for me. And so I just, for the rest of the day, I sold elsewhere. And then the next day, I was like, I'll just pull over middle of the day and call the San Diego Police Department. That was my plan. I was like, I'm going to ask them to get a background check on me. That's all I knew, right? I didn't problem solve. I'm going to call San Diego. And turns out my org leader calls me and is like, you're going to get followed tomorrow. And the person that was following me was a friend that went to my high school who was in our org. And I was like, yeah. I was like, but I have to call to get my permit. And she's like, oh, you can do that tomorrow. And I was like, oh boy. Okay, yeah, it can wait a day, right? So anyways, I'm having this follow day, one of my buddies from high school, and we're going around. All of a sudden I go in this one neighborhood, and when you feel the heat, it's almost like when you play GTA, Grand Theft Auto, and you get the stars. And you're like, uh-oh, I better leave this neighborhood. A couple people acted funny, and you can kind of feel cops are coming.
This is good. Yeah. Nobody's talked about this. Nobody's talked about this during a blue light special, but this is absolutely, there's like a tension.
Isn't it true?
Where there's a specific way that Mrs. Jones says something to you. You're like, oh boy.
She's going to call the cops.
You can almost time it. You're like, I think I have one more approach or demo left in me before I come out of this house and there's a cop outside.
Yep. Yeah. And you're like, it's coming. So I get in my car.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting, I tell the first year, because I'm like, I'm trying to set a good example. I'm like, Brian, I was like, I just so you know, I wouldn't normally leave my neighborhood like this. You should just keep selling when people start acting weird. But the sheriff told me directly to get a permit and I don't have it. So I'm going to leave for now. Right. So I was like, I want to cover all the bases, make sure the first year doesn't learn from my bad example. So I go to a different area. I park, sit down. I'm closing and reclosing. And I don't think they actually bought, but it was like close. One of those?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden someone walks in the door like, there's a bunch of cops. Is that your car out there? And I'm like, shit. Uh-oh. I look and there's like, how they send way too many cop cars? There's like 5 sheriff cars.
It's
surrounded.
It's like you're Pablo Escobar at the end.
Yeah, might as well be a helicopter like out there. And I'm like,
we have got you surrounded.
Here we go. So I walk out there, and this is the craziest thing, Andres. They were like, there was a car that parked here last week with out-of-state plates and crossed the field and did a breaking and entering over there. So literally, this neighborhood was on like high alert because there was just a robbery. And so as soon as I parked in that same spot that the guy parked in,
the odds.
Like, what are the chances? Like, they call immediately, right? So then I'm obviously there, and then they're calling it in. And the guy that I'm talking to he's kind, he's friendly. He's like, the sheriff told you to get a permit, not to sell without a permit. I was like, he's like, man. And you could see the disappointment on his face. He's like, there's nothing I can do about it, man. Because you build the rapport and he likes you. And he's like, I can't really do anything about this. And I could tell like he called the sheriff and you could tell the sheriff was kind of pissed. And there was a funny story there where I was like trying to make light of it because you got a first year, you pretend like this is going to be the best story ever. And I'm like joking with them about their taser gun. And I was like, I heard you have to get shot by those things in order to carry them. He's like, yeah. It's like, how's it feel? He's like, why don't you go for a run? And I was like, I don't know. So anyway, the whole time I like turn it into this big joke for this first year. And I'm in the back seat. He's in the front seat, chit-chatting with the police officer because I know he's not in really any trouble. He wasn't selling. Right. So we get to the police station. They're interviewing me. And like halfway there, it hits me like, this is real. What's going to happen?
You're getting booked. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we get there. They put us in shackles, like wrists and feet. Like I have a photo of this. And then they get our mug shots. And I have a newspaper of this too. We're
Is there a
smiling.
mugshot of you somewhere?
Let's, yeah.
I'm gonna look this up. Varberg.
No. Don't. I'm just gonna put it in the chat so you know what to search, but not everyone on listening.
I see.
Can look it up, but just type that into Google right there. Type that into Google. They deleted the official website, but this is a blog post. It's called Books and Bad Boys.
And
this is
my God!
Did you find it?
No way.
Just you can show the mugshot. Show the mugshot. Show the mugshot.
Well, let me. Wait. Share screen. Here we go. Lay off the books. It says.
Yeah, lay off the books. Books and Bad Boys.
There it is. Oh, you guys are just
look at them cheesing. Yes, puka shell necklace. Look at that. So
bro, you are so white.
So I have the newspaper saved, and imagine this, Andres. On the front page of the newspaper in this small little county is like that picture of me and Brian, and it says, "Find out what they did. Crime Watch, page 6." And you like flipping the newspaper, and it's a whole page of all these like mugshots. People are like black eyes, like it looks like they're beat up, and there's us right in the middle, smiling, and it says panhandling, which is begging, like asking people for money when you're not supposed to. That's like what they put in the newspaper that we were known for. So anywho, long story short, I call my host parent. They show up. Apparently my host dad, he had gotten arrested because he was selling in an illegal county where you're not allowed to sell, and he got arrested too. So he's all excited. He shows up to the my host dad that summer was alumni. And he shows up and he's like got his phone out and he's like, "Peter," and I'm like wrists with the chain down to my feet, like and he's like trying to get the policeman to like get in the picture with me. And the cop's like, no, the cop didn't want his photo taken. So I have this picture of me just like cheesing in the shackles, right? And that made me feel so much better that like my host dad was there and he bailed us out. But I remember when I like got called into another room because like first year was let off the hook. But I got called in another room and they're explaining like my court date and like pleading guilt, like all this stuff. And they I don't remember exactly what they said. They said something and I just literally look at them and I started to kind of like get nervous and emotional and just kind of like had this like, what does that mean? Like I didn't know, like, how in trouble am I? Like, what's going to happen next? And, we had the legal department. It was really simple. Basically, I showed up to a court date and I had to end up giving a letter of apology to the sheriff. And I had to do 10 hours of community service. So I like worked at a Goodwill for like half a Sunday afternoon and like one day, and I was done. Right. And so that was the extent of my punishment. But I went to that court date and the sheriff was there in person. And I was like, all you know what to do is you just smile, like have a good attitude. So imagine me at this court date, just smiling. And that sheriff was like, "Wipe that smile off your face, son." And I was like, "Sorry, like I'm just trying to have a good attitude here. I don't want to get negged out because I got to go sell books." And this is the funniest story. So after we get bailed and my host dad drives me back to my car, which still has the phones in the glove box, right? It's 8:30. We've got more doors to knock on.
Yeah, it's not the end of the day.
First year gets in the car, I was like, we're going to the next county over. And we knocked on another door to wrap and have the stop time, right? Like we had to finish up.
You have to.
We did another couple approaches. And then so we drop off, and this first year was loving it. I was like, I had to calm him down so he wouldn't share this story at a Sunday meeting because we had so much fun getting arrested, right? Because I turned it into a thing for him.
A good experience.
And then the host dad was like, "Peter, don't tell the roommates." He was like, when and my roommate that summer, Joey Thomas. So the Thomases is another family, like the Barnetts.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking earlier. There's like a bunch of them that sold.
Yeah.
But
John
he was
Thomas,
like,
Joe.
on Sunday, we will ask the roommates, and I'm going to tell them, Peter got arrested. Can you guess which day? And we'll see if they could tell the change in your attitude. And we ran the experiment, and they had no idea, right? Because I just went back to work the next day, and it's like I came home and, student manager. It was like my 4th or 5th summer. I couldn't let that get to me. So that's my arrest story. Every time I apply for
really good.
Kids ministry. I didn't know, like, they were like, oh, it's off your record. And then I like apply for kids ministry at church, and they're like, what happened in North Carolina? Listen, and I'm talking to like this director of children's ministry at my church. I'm like, this is going to be funny. And I like tell them the whole story, and I get them laughing, and they're like, oh, okay, no big deal. Cause it shows up. It's like, I got arrested. I imagine after a few years, it's going to be gone, but
I think it's 7
for a
years
while,
later, or maybe more.
Yeah, it was
That's
there.
hilarious. That's hilarious, dude. And the best part of that story is the attitude part. It's okay. It's gonna be fine. And you knew that you didn't do anything wrong. Well, I mean, you knocked. Well,
I technically, I was in trouble. I knew it, and it's like there were times that I was like worried about: is there going to be real consequences to this? But for the most part, it's like because I was being followed. I think that's what saved it for me. To be honest, I had to be strong because I had this first year behind me. I had to be a good attitude because I didn't want their summer to get ruined. And I don't know how that would have gone down if it was just me by myself.
Who knows? But you did the right thing. And that's really awesome. That's a good arrest story. I love this. Well, with all the cops. We haven't had an arrest story in a while. This is good. I appreciate that.
Good.
Appreciate it. Bro, well, thank you so much, man. This has been a blast. Thank you for letting me tell some stories as well. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some time with me. This has been good.
Thanks, Andres. I've been thinking about this for a while. I used to hang out with Nick Taverdi a lot, and I was like, one day I'm going to get on that podcast thing they do. We'll have to have the whole Varberg family.
Yes, please, dude. Well, it'd be kind of fun is to periodically have some of you guys, like your dad or your uncles, like one-on-one as we go along, and then do like a all y'all, and then so that way it's just more like focus on specifically the family, so we don't have to like avoid, because what happens if you get a lot of people, sometimes you
introduce everybody.
Yeah, they already we would have been like, hey, if you want to hear about so and so's your uncles or your dad's full story, go check out that episode. And then now we can focus on like the family dynamics of it all, and you guys sharing some stories, because I'm sure between all y'all, once you start talking, there's stories that come out naturally. So yeah,
my brother totaled 3 cars in one summer. He's a
good man. See, that's what I'm talking about. What do you Yes, and then and I'd make an exception for your sister if you guys all want to be on it together for that one, because like we've had Aisha and Danny on before, so I don't see why we can do that for fam. Also, keep me posted on this alumni project you're working on. This is really cool. Yes. So we'll stay in touch on that. But we'll wrap it up here, guys. Thank you so much for listening this whole time. I appreciate it if you made it all the way to the end. A lot of people do. But, thank you still for doing so and supporting us that way. Again, if you guys want more information about our sponsors, make sure you DM us or check out the links below. If you want to get in touch with Peter, his Instagram is also going to be linked below. So, or if you have questions for him, make sure you reach out that way. My name is Andres Gamboa. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.